So the purpose of the evaluation was to assess whether the convention has succeeded in achieving its objective of protecting human health and the environment from POPs. And then it went on to say to determine the effectiveness of specific measures and to identify ways to improve the effectiveness of the convention. So just to show you, part of, for those of you who haven't been to a negotiation, I hope it would be interesting to find out how you get an article into a treaty. So in this case, my colleague, my monitoring colleague and I had developed a proposal, and we introduced it to an existing article in the treaty, and it didn't get discussed, so it didn't get included in the negotiating text, but we insisted that it go in the meeting report, and we asked other delegations to study it in the intersessional period. Oh, it worked. I'm glad. So what we did before the next negotiating round is we consulted other delegations, and we introduced a CRP, conference room paper. So these are papers that you introduce at meetings. They only have a life for the lifespan of the meeting, and they die. So they aren't picked up at the next meeting. So it's often used to affect text at a specific meeting. So here we drafted, we handed this in on the Sunday, so we would get conference room paper 1. We were all excited. And the reason being, by the end of a negotiating round, you could have like 50 conference room papers. And by the end, nobody's even reading them, right? So if you have number 1, people, ooh, first one out, people pay attention. So we got our proposal for Article 16 included into an existing article. And we were hoping to have a separate article on this, but we were just trying to do this in little baby steps. And sure enough, the legal drafting group helped us out by saying, oh, this is so different. It should be in a separate article. And that was part of our plan, but the legal drafting group helped us carry it out. And then the last part was, again, before INC 5, we again consulted, and in the final negotiating round, the text, it changed. Obviously, you expect that in multilateral negotiations. We thought it got watered down a bit. But ultimately, what we ended up with was the article that we used for our review in the Stockholm Convention. So what we did this time, we say we've done the first effectiveness evaluation for the Stockholm Convention. Technically, the Secretariat, because we had a treaty deadline to do one earlier, the Secretariat did a kind of light review early on, and the committee that I chaired, or I'm still chairing, since we're not quite finished, this is the first one that was done on the basis of a framework adopted by the Conference of the Parties. And that's quite important because it's hard to do an evaluation if you don't evaluate it against something. So this was the article we ended up with. So starting 4 years after the date of entry into force of the convention, so the treaty entered into force in 2004, and at COP4, the Secretariat tabled its first light review just to show that we met that obligation. And then they decided at COP4 that we would do these evaluations every 6 years. So the one I chaired is just the first one of that first 6-year period. It's important to look here too at what the COP was supposed to do at the first meeting. They had to agree to arrangements to provide itself with comparable monitoring data. And this is going to be interesting to you for the simulations that are coming up on Tuesday and Wednesday, because one of the groups is doing effectiveness evaluation. Now, you think this has all been set up under the Stockholm Convention, and you'd think people would just continue with that in Mercury. But in Mercury, right now, we're having this debate all over again. about what kind of monitoring arrangements, what are we going to monitor, who's going to do the monitoring. So it's interesting. So the monitoring arrangements are done on a regional basis, and basically what they have done has been very practical and tried to use all sorts of existing monitoring arrangements, and also worked on helping regions that don't have monitoring capacity to improve that capacity so that they can measure all over the world how well the treaty's doing. And it says in the bottom that they have to report to the COPs. So there have been 2 major reporting cycles by the Global Monitoring Program set up under the committee, or under the convention. Now, this is also interesting. We'll get into this in a bit more detail. The evaluation is to be conducted on the basis of available, that was a key word, scientific, environmental, technical, and economic information. But then it says specifically reports. So that's national reports governments submit about how they're implementing their obligations. Or pardon me, that's the monitoring reports, national reports, and then non-compliance information. Now, for any of you who've been to the Stockholm Convention, we have not yet agreed on a compliance mechanism there. Sadly, I've chaired a number of negotiating rounds where we're still working on that. So there was a lack of information there on compliance.